We're joined now in Studio 3 by Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And by the way, we should say we've had her Republican challenger, John Deaton, on the show. He'll be on again soon. And coming up in mid-October, GBH and New England Public Media in Western Mass will be hosting a debate between the two candidates. We'll give you more details as we get closer.
So speaking of debate, Senator, there's going to be one next week between former President Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. You got any advice on what you should do?
Okay, so let me think. This is the prosecutor Kamala Harris versus the convicted felon Donald Trump. Let me think how that one's going to play out. You know, I think Kamala's going to do great. And the reason is because she's basically been waging the same fight for all of her professional career. She's been out there fighting as a prosecutor, as an attorney general, as a senator, as vice president, for people who get cheated, and leading the fight to make sure that women have access to abortion when extremist Republicans want to take it away. Donald Trump has been fighting for Donald Trump for his whole life, and pretty much nobody else. So I think that's what this debate is going to show.
You know, you have, for your whole career, been one who believes the rich need to pay their fair share. Mm-hmm. It appears that Kamala Harris believes they should pay a less fair share than Joe Biden does when it comes to long-term capital gains, without giving people a total headache. And correct me if I'm wrong. You own a stock, for example, for more than a year. You pay a long-term capital gain when you sell this thing. And under the Biden proposal, the rate would have risen from 20 to, I think, almost 40%. And under the Kamala Harris proposal, I think from yesterday in New Hampshire or sometime this week, if you make more than $1 million in income, it would go to 29%. Obviously, splitting the difference between the current rate and the Biden rate. Does that trouble you?
Look, it's not the way I would have done this. I think that the rate ought to be higher, but I really want to stop to underscore she's headed this in the right direction. Donald Trump actually wants to go the other way, and that is lower the rate. So we've got a clear contrast here between Trump, who says, let the billionaires make even more money, and Harris, who says, no, we're going to take a bite out of that. I also want to say on all of the other tax provisions that we're talking about here that would help raise revenue and give us the revenue we need to make the investments in housing and childcare, to make the investments in infrastructure, that she has underscored she is in the same place. She's going to make this happen.
Well, you know a tremendous amount, not just about taxes, but about bankruptcy. We have just been reading endlessly about this dilatory character, the guy that runs Steward Healthcare, who's refused a subpoena to appear before Congress. I was stunned reading the Globe reporting about him. I didn't realize that you could say you were giving $10 million to in memory of your, or in honor of your mother, that was not from your family trust but from Steward Healthcare, and that seems to be something he's done over and over again, spend the company money on homes and vacations and everything else. What do you make of this case?
So I have two thoughts when I read that same Spotlight piece, and it is a reminder of how powerful that Spotlight team is and all the information they pull together. The first is there needs to be a criminal investigation here. And while I can't speak to whether or not someone in particular has broken the law, I just want to do a little reminder here that anybody who takes corporate money for his or her own personal use, that's known as income, and they need to pay federal and state taxes on it, and failure to do that would be a violation of law. In addition, anytime the books of a company do not accurately reflect ownership, income, outgo, that is a violation of both state and federal law. Remember Donald Trump's 34 felony convictions?
Yes, I do.
They had to do with books and records that didn't accurately reflect and mixed up personal expenses with what should have been business expenses. So I start there, but the second point for me is, what the heck is Ralph Delatorre doing still in charge of Steward Hospitals?
Yeah.
The chain is now in bankruptcy. That means there is a bankruptcy judge that has some oversight, But Delatorre is the guy who's still in there. He's got access to all of the information. He's the one negotiating the deals on which hospitals are closed and what constitutes a good bid and how much somebody should get and how much the state should put in. And my view on this is no, he should be replaced. And now that he is refusing a congressional subpoena, my view is the grounds were already strong to replace him. He should be replaced.
So Marjorie said you know something about bankruptcy. Are you America's premier bankruptcy expert? I mean, you're in the top 3. So there's a bankruptcy proceeding. Where is it, in Houston? Mm-hmm. Is Massachusetts a party?
Yeah, we're creditors.
Okay, so why isn't Andrea Campbell or Maura Healey saying there should be a receiver, and rather than the abstract like you're doing, you're not a party. One of the litigants, the state of Massachusetts or its representative, the Attorney General, says we want a receiver. Delatorre has proven himself to be incapable of not screwing the patients and workers.
No, I can't speak
Should
to
they
that.
do that?
Look,
Should they do that?
My view,
They should do that.
My view is that guy needs to be replaced. And look, I understand. People think we're probably near the end of this process, but understand what a trustee in bankruptcy would do here. Not only would all of the information be available to everybody, it would be public, you could see it all. The trustee would also be somebody who would turn around and investigate Ralph Delatorre and all of his financial shenanigans up to this point. I just think it's really important to have a trustee.
Can we talk philosophy for a second?
Sure.
When I read the story in the Globe, they've done brilliant reporting from Brian McGrory exposing the jets and the yachts
and
to the Spotlight
at the
team.
Olympics just a couple of weeks
Right,
ago
when
to
he's at
see
Versailles.
the dressage.
Right, exactly. The reluctance in this country to criminally go after CEOs. Malta has an indictment pending, wherever Malta is, for good reason, from what I read. Well, I understand there's a grand jury allegedly impaneled in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I think in Massachusetts, under Levy.
It's in Boston.
I understand that they try to insulate themselves, but the example we've often used, forget the big picture, the $10 million from the company buying condominiums all over the world while the company is losing hundreds of millions of dollars and people are dying, that sort of thing.
Don't forget the $13,000 a night stay over in South Africa for safari.
Let's bring it down to a much more human level. At the same time that he's doing this, a device, the name of which I forget, was repossessed from a hospital in Massachusetts, and the woman whose life would have been saved, said the experts, with that device died as a result of that. It's not hard to me to make the connection. Why is there not a criminal case already brought against this grifting criminal?
So you hit the first part right, and that is the reluctance all across this country to hold these rich guys accountable, not just when they steal money, but when they actually cost people their lives.
Why?
And so here, let me do the other half. Before I get to the why, let me at least say there is something we can do about this. So I've been going after private equity for a long time now. And so, for example, coming out of the pandemic, there's a study that shows comparing nursing homes that were owned by private equity and nursing homes that were not. Did you know that you had a 10% greater chance of dying in a nursing home if your nursing home was owned by private equity? Just think about that. And yet, these guys aren't held responsible for this. So what I've been working on is first to try to say, let's take away the tax incentives for these private equity buyouts. Let's force them to do more information, expose more transparency. But the other part in my bill now says that if you can draw the direct link between an executive who knowingly cut back so that people's lives were put at risk and somebody dies from it, then you can be held responsible for involuntary manslaughter. I get that you could draw that line right now, but at a minimum, we need as a country to underscore that and hold these guys accountable.
But you're not suggesting that the reason there's such a reluctance to go after the big boys for the most part criminally, as opposed to civilly, if at all, is because the law is not strong enough?
I think partly the law has been interpreted for so long, that these guys are smart. Look what they built. These guys are terrific. And yes, I get it. Sometimes business reverses itself and markets that went up come down. I think there's been a kind of, they are the masters of the universe. They are the titans who walk among us. And the reality is, not so much. these are guys, look, they worked hard. I get it, but a lot of people worked hard. And they didn't make their fortunes by cheating other people.
We're talking to Elizabeth Warren. Can I ask you one last Steward question, unless you have one?
Well, I have one about
do it. You do
it. Two of the hospitals in Massachusetts, as you know, are closed now, and there have been these really horrible stories about the Dorchester Carnegie Hospital and some employee saying, I thought somebody would do something, patients not knowing where they're going to go because another hospital is so far away from them. So is Governor Healy, she has, they're both closed. Has she done enough? I mean, could there have been more done to keep these open? You mentioned that De Torre is the person that decides which hospitals stay open and closed. That seems unconscionable at this moment.
We need to keep the blame firmly where it belongs, and that is Ralph De Torre and the henchmen who sucked all the value out of these hospitals. By the time the governor is called on, she's looking at empty shells that have been hollowed out. And that tells us two things. First, how aggressively we need to be going after De Torre and his henchmen. But secondly, we got to have a change in the law and much more aggressive oversight. I'm working on it at the federal level. Don't have Republican support on this yet, but I'm pushing hard for it. But we could also do this at the state level. These guys only get access to our healthcare system because as a Commonwealth, we let them.
The private equity people.
Yep.
Okay. So
by the way, some regulations on that are pending. Well, actually, some of them passed on Beacon. What do you think of the legislature going home for 5 months?
Yeah, come on. I'm swimming in my lane here.
Okay, but
That's
you're
a
saying,
direct
and
enough
we talked
answer
about.
from
I
me,
think we talked
actually.
about this with you before when Shirley Young was in for Jim. That what do you think of private equity owning any of these healthcare facilities?
Look, I don't get why we let for-profit actors move in and say that your healthcare is not only going to be decided by some corporate guy who's figured out how to squeeze an extra nickel out, but that somehow our whole healthcare system is just going to keep producing billions of dollars for these guys. And look, we could go in a lot of places with this. Have you taken a close look at Medicare Advantage?
No.
I'm just on these guys
It's
like
bad,
crazy.
though, isn't it?
Oh, so they are required by law to produce, to cover exactly the same things that Medicare would, right? And they go out and advertise. They say, oh, but we'll also give you a gym membership, and we'll give you eyeglasses once every 10 years, or whatever it is they offer. And they drag people in because they have big advertising budgets. And then how is it that they make billions of dollars in profits charging the government the same thing that Medicare would have charged, and they have to cover the same services? And the answer is twofold, right? They upcode everybody so that somebody who has a cough has possible emphysema, and therefore the government pays more money to these guys. And the second is they just deny the care that people need. It is a scam that is raking billions of dollars out of our healthcare system.
So if people
every
are
year.
making their choice, because I know if you get Medicare, you're supposed to make another choice in addition to Medicare, so it should not be.
Well, you shouldn't say supposed to make.
Well, you have to, right?
We're talking about the Medicare versus Medicare Advantage.
Yes.
Medicare Advantage are these privately run for-profit insurance companies that say to the government, we will give seniors the same kind of coverage they would have gotten under Medicare. But the idea was they would offer better services for the same money.
Yes.
What they do is they offer worse services, and they charge the government more money by upcoding everything that somebody has wrong. And
Worse services for the patient, more money for the government.
That's exactly
So people
right.
should not be signing up for this.
Look, I'm sure there are some good Medicare Advantage plans out there, but the data that keep coming through showing that billions of dollars are being sucked out of this system, and people are not getting the care they need. And I use that as just one example. It's all the way through our healthcare system.
By the way, you're allowed to take a breath one time.
Okay,
in this
sorry.
30 minutes,
I get
okay?
a little.
You can take a breath.
Are you telling me I get a little excited?
No, you may. We're talking to Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's in studio with us. She's obviously running for re-election. And your opponent was picked on Tuesday. John Deaton is the Republican nominee. We spoke to him. I'm paraphrasing one of the things he said about you is you care a lot about taxing the rich more, but don't spend nearly as much time helping the middle class. How do you plead, Senator Warren?
Look, this is my whole life's work, has been about how to help working families, middle class families, survive in a world, in a swimming pool that is increasingly full of sharks. that was what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, what I built it for, and what it is now doing, I say proudly. In the United States Senate, I have been so blessed, and it truly has been an honor to be able to get in these fights, to do something like break the hearing aid monopoly so that instead of people paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for hearing aids, they now can buy them over the counter. And that has
Which has brought
cut
the price down.
way down. In other words, you use market forces here. It's going after the big banks so that they stop hitting people with overdraft fees when they overdraft their checking account by $2, $3, and they get hit with a $40 fee. Are you kidding me? So it's this kind of work that being in the United States Senate, I've had a chance to be able to dig in on and deliver. And look, and we've done it together. I want to give full credit because the Democrats in Congress have done a lot. $35 insulin that folks have got now. A $2,000 cap on what seniors will spend on prescription drugs. These are huge differences and more work to do.
You know, one of the things I do wonder, though, while we're on the subject of Medicare, is we always talk about the fact that it's so disgraceful that you can't get coverage for your teeth.
Yeah.
You know, who I mean, I assume you're going to say it's Republicans, but who's the lobby, the anti-Medicare to cover teeth people?
Rich guys who don't want to pay more in taxes.
That's it?
Yeah. And they have a lot of power in Washington. I mean, you're surprised by this
Well,
answer?
I guess it
They're
just seems like,
leaders
I
of
don't
the
mean
pro-bad teeth.
it just seems like
pack.
it's such a basic thing. I mean, hearing aids is obviously a basic thing too, but if you have a bad tooth and you're 85,
No vision either.
I
That
get
was
it.
what,
No
Yeah,
vision.
vision.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
can
what
we
are you
even-
supposed
can
to
I
do?
take your point actually and make it even more aggressively? What we have also learned is that if you have untreated hearing loss, that is, you don't have hearing aids, or untreated vision loss, that is, you don't have the glasses you need, do you know that the odds that you will end up with dementia, Alzheimer's, goes up? So we have, under our current laws, we save a few $100 a year on different people who need help and end up paying for them to be in long-term care because of earlier onset of dementia. This just makes no sense at all. But every time we go into this fight, the Republicans not only do not want us to expand Medicare coverage, they're the reverse. Donald Trump put into every one of his 4 budgets that he would cut Social Security and Medicare. 1, 2, 3, 4. And J.D. Vance has stood up and said, yep, the only way that we can be realistic about our budgets is to cut Medicare and Social Security. Yeah, because their view of realistic is that billionaires get to keep it all and everybody else can go without glasses.
Although you worked
By the way-
with Vance on some populist issues,
I
though,
did.
too. He seems to have turned around on some of these.
Well, let me say, when I worked with him, and I was glad to work with him, it's on a clawback after the banks had nearly caused another banking crisis. Remember Silicon Valley
Yes.
Bank? I worked with him on a bill to say you get to get some of that money back. It did not mean that we were in the same place on many other issues, but you know, that is my approach on this, Marjorie. If I can find a place where I can work with a Republican and that increases the chances I can get something passed. My hearing aid bill, you know who my partner was? Chuck Grassley.
Oh, my gosh, that's right.
And
He probably had some hearing problems. I think he's in his late 80s, isn't he?
88.
88, okay.
Yep.
ready to run for president.
You know, but Josh Hawley, other end of the age spectrum, Josh Hawley and I worked together to get a bill through that said when these airline companies cancel your flights, they have to give you your money back automatically. I mean, real shocker there. But
By the way, the reason I'm laughing is not at you. I'm just laughing. I can't get it out of my head. Paul Begala was on CNN last night, and he's talking about J.D. Vance. He says, the guy doesn't even know how to order a donut. So that was. We're talking to Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, back to John Deaton for a second. He describes himself in a way that most of the Republican governors have been pretty popular in this state, who've been pretty popular in the state too, is a social liberal, fiscal conservative. What's wrong with John? Other than the fact that he wants to replace you, I don't mean this facetiously. Obviously, you want to win. What's wrong with John Deaton and John Deaton's politics? And by the way, he says he didn't vote for Trump. He's not going to vote for Trump this time. But go ahead.
So let's start with how he got to be the Republican nominee, right? He's down in Rhode Island. 3, maybe 4 crypto billionaires recruit him to run for the Republican nomination. He moves over to Massachusetts, and they put $2.5 million into ads to get him the Republican nomination. The other 2 Republicans didn't have that kind of money. So now he's got that seat, and now the crypto billionaires are hoping maybe they'll have a chance to pick me off, and that means that they will get rid of someone who is not always on board with the things that they want to be able to do.
Is that your only concern about
So
his
I was
candidacy?
just going to say, but here's the deal. I get what the crypto billionaires are trying to do here, but understand, if they get John Deaton elected, the consequence of that will be in a 50-50 Senate that the Republicans take control. And Republican control means, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 Supreme Court nominees that come up next will have to be Republican approved. It means that the Republican efforts in the House and the Senate to have a nationwide abortion ban will have new life. It means cuts to Medicare and Social Security will be back on the table. And it means that billionaires will get even more tax cuts.
So you discount what he said, I think, on election night. I read somewhere that he's open to voting for a leader of either party. He hasn't made up his mind yet. What's your reaction to
Look, once you caucus with a party, which is what happens at the beginning, you declare in a 50-50 Senate, that is the party that becomes the majority. And that determines whether Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell is the leader of the Senate. That determines who is every single chair of every single committee. That determines who controls what votes come to the floor and what votes don't come to the floor. That is the person who determines what Supreme Court nominees, what Court of Appeals nominees, what district court nominees move forward and what don't. So understand, in a 50-50 Senate, which is what we have, we lose 1 seat as Democrats and the Republicans take over, and we've lost it all.
Talking to Elizabeth Warren.
You know, you were at the Democratic National Convention, of course, and you spoke at the Democratic National Convention. You got a huge standing ovation. People were cheering. You got emotional.
I did.
What was that like?
I just felt so grateful to stand on that stage. You know, you all know this. I never in a million years thought I was going to run for public office. I always thought I was going to be the policy dork that would, you know, send the boring papers across the desk and try to get somebody to lift them up and use them. And to realize I was in a room with thousands and thousands of volunteers. These are not people who are paid to be there, who said, we're in this fight together. It really is. It's an incredible honor to be able to fight these fights.
So, Elizabeth Warren, I think what most people want to know is, if you were reelected, this is a central question that I'm hearing, will you or will you not support getting rid of the penny? Yes or no? I don't want any BS. I mean to be respectful. Yes or no, getting rid of the penny?
I like pennies.
No. Is that true?
Yeah,
it's sad. Did you read
yeah,
the story in the New York
well,
Times?
it was a
400
20-page
You didn't read the story in the
story.
magazine
Who could
about the
blame
penny?
her?
Read
Yeah.
the story, get back to us, okay?
All
I
right,
think
I'll
you
get
may
back
change
to
your mind.
I'll get
Yeah.
back to you on
It's
that.
an
I
endless-
have to say, I'm not deeply invested pro penny.
Well, I had a feeling you might
penny.
not be,
It's
yeah.
not in my top 3,
It's not-
maybe
it's
not
not
even
your
in my
lane,
top
I
5.
believe, is the expression
I
you
think
might use.
Thank you.
You know,
Sen-
just one last serious thing. Can I ask one last serious thing
of course
before
you
the
can. We
senator
have
goes?
time.
You know, you hear that abortion is not the top of. It's always about inflation and it's about immigration, but I get a sense, just anecdotally, is obviously for women, it's a huge big deal. I think we sometimes underestimate what it means.
I so agree with you on this. So just think about this. While we're sitting here, more than 30% of all women in America live in a state that effectively bans access to abortion. That means in those states, because I've talked to many women in these states, they walk into an emergency room because they're in the middle of a miscarriage. A doctor examines them, knows exactly what has to come next, but says, I'm sorry, I can't give you the medical treatment that you need. You have to go out to the parking lot and hemorrhage for a few more hours and then come in and let us check. And if you're closer to death, then we will give you the care you need. And if you're not, we'll send you back out to bleed longer. That's more than 30% of our sisters, our cousins, our friends, people we went to school with, people, real people. And if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance make it to the White House, it won't be 30%. It'll be 100%. I can't say this enough here in Massachusetts. They're coming for all of us. They got different ways to lay it out. Project 2025 has laid it out. J.D. Vance himself has signed a letter to the Department of Justice saying enforce the Comstock Act to take away access to abortion materials all across this country. They are coming for all of us. The only way that we can guarantee access to abortion for our daughters and our granddaughters is to pass it into federal law. And that's what Kamala Harris and a Democratic Senate and Democratic House will do.
Senator Warren, as always, thanks for your time. It's great to see you. Really
Thank you
appreciate
very,
it.
very much for being
Thanks
with
so
us,
much.
Senator. We really appreciate it.